Greetings, and welcome back to 𝐬𝐻𝐵𝐻𝐼's studio, here in Leitrim's Iron Mountains. If you're new here, my name is Harriet. Today's video is a collaboration with a fellow artist and YouTuber, 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸, over at Deevz Zevde. This is my fourth YouTube collaboration, and second with 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸. 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸 is a Slovenian artist who creates imaginative pattern design. 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸 has sent me another beautiful floral illustration, and I have brought it here into Photoshop, where I am formatting it for my printer. First, to crop it into a tidy square. The photograph 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸 sent me is very clear and easy to work with. The image is perfectly straight. I just raised the brightness and increased the contrast to get a nice, sharp and clean image for the printer. I'm printing this now onto an A3 piece of 300 GSM Fabriano watercolor paper. And here I use my guillotine just to trim the A3 sheet into a neat square. This image, 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸 tells me, is inspired by playing cards. The main flowers are the spades and the other flowers the clubs, and the stone beyond it represents the diamond. With these three elements, he said he would leave the heart suite to me because of my heart series of watercolors. But I love the theme of playing cards, and it immediately made me think of Alice in Wonderland. Perhaps it's the way 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸 draws these surreal plants. I feel they fit perfectly into Lewis Carroll's subterranean fantasy world of bizarre narrative. I adore the story's fantastic aesthetic and the iconography that has surrounded the story since its publication in 1865. So I decided to go with that and make the piece Alice in Wonderland themed. Beginning out, I'm just playing around here, very loosely sketching whatever comes to mind. Alice in Wonderland, of course, has some very memorable motifs such as the Cheshire Cat, who I really wanted to include sitting on that diamond rock shape. Alice, of course, with her iconic frilly Victorian dress and children's smock apron, and more contemporarily, the big ribbon bow in her hair. I have drawn her costume in a more contemporary Japanese Lolita style, for which Alice has been a huge inspirational source, where she represents an idealized image of eternal innocence and beauty. The imagery associated with Alice in Wonderland has become iconic within the subculture, which celebrates the aesthetic and romanticism of the Rococo period. When figuring out the overall composition, I wanted to try and fuse these ideas together. Lewis Carroll's nonsensical narrative and the iconic motifs associated with it, and of course 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸's surreal representation of the playing card suits. There are so many characters and motifs within the realms of Alice in Wonderland, it then becomes a process of deduction, choosing intuitively the elements that first come to mind, placing them, defining them, adjusting them with the pencil as swiftly as possible. The white rabbit, the caterpillar smoking a hookah on top of a mushroom, and indeed some classic playing cards fluttering around as part of a rhythmic patterned border that aims to balance 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸's decorative edging. I'm enjoying constructing the non-linear juxtaposition of these narrative elements, and 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸's design really fits well into this kind of surreal world. On his channel, Deevz Zevde, 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸 creates a lot of pattern videos. I've been watching them for a good while now, and at first glance they might seem to appear quite simplistic, but they have a spontaneous quality to them that demonstrates his unique visual understanding of balance, form, perspective, and optical illusions, with original motifs that don't always make structural sense, inviting us to think about shapes and perceptions in new ways. 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸's work presents as an imaginative playtime through visions of perspective, and his ability to produce forms that trick our brains into seeing things which may or may not be real, impossible patterns that your mind doesn't quite understand. So if you haven't already, do go along and check out 𝕬𝐻𝐻𝐸's channel as well. I will leave a link below the video. So once I was happy with my sketch, I decided to ink my pencil drawings and redefine the line work. My tool of choice is my new glass dip pen. This is my first artwork using this pen, and I was excited to try it out on something substantial like this. At first, the pen with its fine glass tip seems fragile, and I feel clumsy towards it. But after swatching it out on a little piece of card, I soon felt quite comfortable and confident using it. It writes and draws beautifully and loads a lot more ink than I was expecting. I quickly learned that by only dipping the ink halfway up the nib's spiral design, it creates a smooth and continuous flow. Otherwise, too much ink on the nib makes the ink flow faster and the lines thicker, and makes it more prone to dripping out drops of ink. I like the consistent thickness of the line work. When using other pigment liners and drawing pens, I'm generally inclined towards the thicker ones like an 0.8, which is ideally comparable to the nice dense lines made by this glass pen, which also has a finesse to it, where you could thin out lines with the amount of pressure you use, so it's quite like a cartridge pen in that sense. The inks I'm using are by Winston & Newton, which a dear friend of mine gave to me as a gift, and I'm feeling so grateful for them now for use with this new fun pen. The inks are a long-standing classic since their launch way back in 1890. Those tiny little nostalgic jars I remember from art in school, formulated from a series of soluble dyes mixed with a shellac binder, making them dry quite fast and making them transparent and water resistant when they are dry, as Indian ink can get quite gloopy when it starts to dry. I wanted to be able to rinse the nib as I worked without having to do too much messy cleaning at my desk, without the risk of breaking the nib against a glass jar of water in the manner that you might wash out a paintbrush. With its fragile appearing glass tip, I took added precaution when handling and cleaning the pen, always cleaning it and returning it to the foam-lined box when I paused or was not using it. For careful cleaning, I used a little ceramic bowl in which I placed a thick piece of black foam sponge at the bottom, and then I filled it with water until the sponge was completely waterlogged, and this served as a soft padding to rinse and clean the glass tip in whenever I felt it was starting to clog up or wasn't flowing as good as it had been. I think this would also work if you want to quickly change the colour of your ink. Although Indian ink is water soluble, it does not have a forgivable nature, where you can wash out the colour and any mistakes then redefine the line. With the Indian ink, there's a limit to the amount of being able to wash it out, depending on how absorbent your paper is, as the dyes are much more soluble than pigment-based mediums. They dry quite fast, in under a minute or so I had to be careful not to smear the wet ink accidentally with my hands at times. And as I said, the ink is waterproof once dry, making it easy to paint into without disturbing the dry line work. I just took my time when starting out with the pen and naturally got faster as I went, just following the lines and redefining them bit by bit. I quite like inking the pencil drawing. It's very satisfying to do and also relaxing. Careful observation and tidying up the sketch, and discovering new ways of making marks with the pen as well. Once all of my line work was done, I made sure the ink was completely dry before using my vinyl eraser to clear away all traces of the original pencil undersketch. Like our last collaboration, 𝕬𝐮 and I have decided to keep the same format, a square image with black line work and one additional colour. Our last piece was a yellow wasp themed artwork, and this time, for the accent colour, 𝕬𝐮 has chosen reds. Initially, for adding the colour, I intended to introduce the red as an ink, and just use black ink and red ink. But by the time I finished the line work, I realised watercolour might be more versatile with its forgivable nature, ease of control and more choices for various shades of red. I started out by painting a simple wash in the background of my composition, which focused the colour saturation close to the black outlines. This instantly enhanced all the characters and motifs in the foreground and created a field of depth. I really like this colour combination of black, white and red. It has a timeless quality to it. I really enjoyed this part, starting with a rich pigmented crimson red, which I washed out and I got some very nice transparent paler versions of it. And then I introduced a vermilion red on the fly agaric mushroom. These are the large iconic toadstools with the red cap and the white spots. I really like the contrast between these two reds. It is subtle, but it's still there. The vermilion red, I think perhaps has a brighter fiery tone to it, and it's not as deep as the crimson. I also did the Cheshire Cat in the shade of red. Once I defined the main areas of colour, I mixed a bit of black watercolour with the crimson, and I got a deep burgundy red, so I used that on her dress. I introduced the deep red ink. I used it with the glass dip pen again to add some parallel contour and cross-hatching for my shading and form on Alice's costume and hair, and on the edge of 𝐬𝐮𝐻𝐬𝐻𝑆 diamond-shaped rock formation that the Cheshire Cat is sitting on. Next, I added a very pale wash of red to some of the larger white areas, creating a soft, subtle red tint to the entire piece and also creating a harmonious tactile quality adjacent to the watery areas of crimson. I fixed a small grey watery mistake that I made when inking her arm and concealed it with a little white gouache mixed with a tint of crimson to match the soft pale red tinting I used for the rest of her skin tone. I added sharp highlights with my white jelly roll onto the dry painting, also adding definition to the folds in the sleeves. These marks were striking against the burgundy red of her dress. I'm really happy with how this piece turned out. The colour scheme is an unusual one which I enjoyed immensely. The red and black together create a sinister air, and juxtaposed with the childlike imagery from the Alice narrative, resulting in an enchanting tension of sweetness with darker undertones. Kawaii noir, cute and dark. I would like to say a huge thank you to 𝕬𝐮𝐻 for doing another collaboration with me and sending me this beautiful surreal design to work with. 𝕬𝐮𝐻 tells me he hopes to post his part of the collaboration before the end of the week, which I will of course link below the video. We're coming to the end of my time-lapse now, so if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you all have a wonderful and inspiring week, and I hope to see you all again soon for another video. Bye bye!